say thank you for the things you taught us, for the warnings that you brought us. Your voice raised up for land and sea. What our tomorrow here might be, your spirit helps to see us through. Speak it out with what we do. Speak it out with what we do. Speak it out with what we do.
So I hope that you can take some comfort and also get some energy from that song. I like to start a thing like this with music because I think music is often what drives people. And I actually start every class with music because it's a way to reflect on some of the lessons we're going to learn that day. So this is something that drives a lot of what I do, the mission that they're talking about and why we think about Rachel. It's the mission that we have here for the Social Science and Environmental Health Research Institute. Northeastern's Central Administration and also the Bouvet College of Health Sciences and the College of Social Sciences and Humanities has given us a lot of resources to start this new institute. President Joseph Aoun and Provost Stephen Director, along with the Dean of Bouvet College, Terry Fulmer, and the past Dean of College of Social Sciences, George Vandenbiel, put a lot of effort into helping us get started. And both Terry Fulmer and Uda Poiger, who's now the interim dean of the Social Sciences and Humanities College, would love to have been here to give greetings to you now, but they are at an administrative meeting, and they will come later to join us during the reception. Terry was really the first person to get the idea of this new endeavor and to put the package together to make it happen. You may know that health and sustainability are two of Northeastern's three pillars, and so we're at least meeting those two. And the third is security, and I think we probably, after the last hurricane, fit into that also. I'd also like to say that this effort today is jointly sponsored by PROTECT, which is the Superfund Research Program at Northeastern, and it stands for the Puerto Rico Test Site to explore contamination threats. And the work that we do in PROTECT is to examine preterm birth in Puerto Rico and the relationship of various environmental contaminants to that preterm birth. And like our institute, is a growing hub for environmental health work on campus, so we hope you'll visit that website as well as ours and get to know the kind of things we're doing. I want to also put a lot of thanks to Matt Judge, a sociology doctoral student and part of our institute, for all the work he put into getting things going, all the details today, and in the sociology anthropology office to Mary Ramsey and Tracy Jonick and Joan Collins for helping out with details. So what's our challenge? Today, contemporary scientists are learning how to manage complex legacies of industrialization and risks of emerging technologies, from climate change to endocrine disruptors. And it's challenging to understand and respond to complex genetic, environmental, economic, and sociocultural influences that all come together to affect environmental health problems such as asthma, allergies, many cancers, many reproductive disorders. So it requires new forms of social science, new forms of life science, new forms of environmental engineering that identify, remediate, and prevent future occurrences. So where do we fit here in that particular world of action? I just want to tell you a few things about what we do, and then I'll say a few words about our speakers, and then we'll get right into them. We are a multifold research institute. We have a weekly lab, which is an incubator for interdisciplinary collaboration. We work on publications, on new research proposals, and on preparing young scholars for careers in the very wonderful intersection of social science and environmental health science. And we seek to broaden that across the whole campus as we train our graduate students and postdocs and work with undergraduates on community-based participatory research to do that kind of work. We have a new NSF training grant specifically designed to do that. It's new directions in environmental ethics, emerging contaminants, emerging technologies, and beyond. We continue the collaboration I've had since 2004 with Silent Spring Institute on biomonitoring and household exposure studies, learning how to measure the harmful chemicals and other contaminants in people's homes and bodies, and how to help reduce those exposures, both personally and through policy levels. We work a lot on research ethics and environmental health. We present research training sessions through the Northeast Ethics Education Partnership, and with our Institute member Ron Sandler through the Ethics Institute here on campus, we'll be doing an informed consent conference in the spring. We coordinate the fracking group in collaboration with Brown University's Natural Resources Research Group to conduct a variety of research projects on this growing environmental issue. And Institute members Sarah Wiley, Leonard Albright, and Danny Faber are doing that work. With Institute member Christine Vitovic, we're developing new mini-courses to teach environmental health science to social science scientists, and the opposite, to teach environmental health science to social scientists. We want to offer that here, and we want to export that on CDs and websites. With our Institute member Sarah Wiley, who's the founder of Public Laboratory for Open Technology and Science, we work with environmentally impacted communities to conduct balloon mapping, remote sensing, spectral imaging, and robotic indoor air and dust collection, and other low-cost participatory projects. Institute member Bindu Panakar leads our efforts in the greening of healthcare through working with Healthcare Without Harm and by our continued leadership of Hospitals for Healthy Environment in Rhode Island. And we've also put together what we hope will be the nation's largest and most comprehensive doctoral program in environmental sociology. So I'm really pleased to work with all those folks and to work with many other people, not just in our institute, but throughout Northeastern. We can't do that kind of work without partners. And in the world of environmental health and justice, I've been able to work with 3 wonderful groups, and that's why I've chosen them as our speakers today. They're organizations I've worked with in different ways over the years, and I'm very, very fortunate to have that experience. So I'm going to introduce them in the order in which they'll speak, and I want to introduce them further after that. First, Julia Brody, who's the Executive Director of Silent Spring Institute. She leads an amazing organization that has pioneered in the discovery of contaminants in people's homes and bodies while empowering research participants with the knowledge from that research. As a unique type of community-based organization, Silent Spring Institute combines science and advocacy in a way that paves the way for others to join those 2 worlds. Just last week, Silent Spring Institute's important work on detecting flame retardants in home environments was splashed across Top Science and other websites. Environmental health scientists, government agencies, and citizens groups come to Silent Spring Institute all the time to learn how they do that important work. Kalila Barnett is the Executive Director of Alternatives for Community and Environment, ACE. She leads an environmental justice organization that's one of the oldest and most respected in the United States. Their work on transit justice in particular has been very, very well noted in our city, and you often see a lot of press mention whenever a key transit issue is discussed. ACE's educational work with youth in the city's schools has been a model for other groups, and their regional leadership in environmental justice has helped other groups to form. And indeed, when my colleagues and I were putting together the Environmental Justice League of Rhode Island, 2 of ACE's organizers came down many times to work with us in the formative stages and to meet with our community partners and organizations to help that get going. Gary Cohen is the Executive Director of Healthcare Without Harm, and he spends his life in various organizing capacities around toxic substances. As the director of the National Toxics Coalition, he helped put toxics action on the map years ago. His energetic leadership of Healthcare Without Harm has led to international efforts to make hospitals and other healthcare institutions healthier places in all environmental areas, including toxics replacement in medical supplies, safer cleaning products, safer building products, landscaping, reduction of medical waste, and many other things. Healthcare Without Harm and its companion group, Practice Green Health, have international reach in these efforts, as you'll hear, and Gary will invite you to a wonderful international conference that will be held in Boston coming up just a few months down the road. So I hope that gives you a sense of what we're doing and why I've been happy to work with those folks and to ask them to come here and speak to you and help us get started with our wonderful work here on campus. So without any further ado, Julia Brody.
Thanks, Bill. It's really wonderful to be here. I'm very excited about the creation of this new center, and of course excited about the 50th anniversary of the publication of the book Silent Spring. At the end of the 20th century, which now seems kind of a long time ago, everybody was getting together their list of the 100 most important people, and very, very few of those people were women. But Rachel Carson showed up on a lot of those lists of the 100 most important people of the 20th century, and I hope that you will be persuaded that she survives very well into the 21st century, and it's fun. It can be exciting or depressing to open Silent Spring to any random page and read it and see the relevance today. She was unbelievably visionary, and yet you can see we have a lot of work left to do to realize the vision that she alerted us to. She was really the first to sound the alarm about the use of the synthetic chemicals that began to come into use at the end of World War II, and to carefully observe and gather together the observations of what was happening to birds and fish and frogs, and then to make the link to the possibility that something that's not very good for eagle's eggs isn't very good for babies and people either. So she's often credited with being the one who really kicked off the modern environmental movement by warning us that the chemicals that we were beginning to use might affect human health. And really, she won some fantastic victories. And it's important to remember that. The Clean Air Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency. So while sometimes we get focused on the limitations of these now well-established entities, it's really important to remember that we did get cleaner air, we did get cleaner drinking water, we did get the opportunity to see alewife and eagles on the Charles River again. So she really, this early environmental movement really did a lot. And then in the 90s, we see the beginning of a kind of new environmental movement that began to arise on Long Island, in Marin County, California, and here in Massachusetts on Cape Cod, that was much more directly focused on human health. And breast cancer activists were a very key piece of this new movement. It's hard to imagine now when you see a football stadium or whatever lit up in pink in October, that this was, not so long ago, a hidden disease. And that Rachel Carson, who was an incredibly courageous woman, was afraid that her credibility would be even further challenged if she told anyone that she herself was undergoing treatment for breast cancer when she testified in Congress. So, but in 1993, in Massachusetts, thanks to the Cancer Registry, and it's really very cool to have Dick Clapp here with us, who was one of the founders of the Massachusetts Cancer Registry. For the first time, they issued information about cancer rates by town, and women could see that cancer rates on Cape Cod, the towns of Cape Cod, were all showing up as having higher than average breast cancer rates. And this was part of the process of women looking around and saying, and finally understanding that breast cancer was common, and that there were places where there were even more breast cancer cases than average. And this led to the founding of the Mass Breast Cancer Coalition. And when they saw what was going on in Cape Cod and began to realize that the cancer dollars were going for mammography and treatment, but no one was really paying any attention to prevention, they formed Silent Spring Institute to address that. And they went to the state for $1 million in funding, which now seems inconceivable, the thousands of women showed up at Government Center and for the first time identified themselves as people who had had breast cancer. And they decided that they wanted this money to remain under their control rather than divvying it up to academics. So that was their vision, to create a lab of their own to study environmental factors in women's health and to do science in a new way as a partnership of scientists and activists, so that activists were defining the questions, they were part of the process, and they were, the scientists were accountable to them. So I think that that's really a very key moment in this environmental movement that we hope will become something that stands up to the test of time. And Phil Brown helped this movement to be born by writing about it and talking about how this was filling a need and how it was different from science as usual. The vision was to focus specifically on prevention and to focus on women's health, which had been neglected. And there was a choice early in the Institute's history to choose a strategy to publish this research in peer-reviewed literature that I think was one of the defining decisions, and also comes out of this sense of the uphill battle at that time, that not only was studies of women's health were not at the center, women in science were not at the center, and even now new research shows ways in which women are disadvantaged as scientists. And so there was a sense that by publishing in peer-reviewed literature, some of these barriers could be overcome. And a second reason for this choice was to ensure that the work could be used by policymakers, that regulators could cite it and rely on it. So I'm going to tell you about some of our work, and we now do have a really pretty strong track record of scientific publication. But at the time, we honestly didn't know if this was going to work, because our science is really unconventional in many ways. So it doesn't actually fit the usual niche that it defines what goes into a scientific journal. So I'm hoping, I don't really know the backgrounds of the people in this room, but I'm looking forward to meeting you later, and I just want to say that the social scientists, we need you to observe these kinds of things and figure out what strategies are going to work, and talk about the ways in which this science is conventional or unconventional, and how that does or doesn't serve the mission. So we didn't know if this strategy was going to work, but we did know that a lot of breast cancer is preventable. We did know that breast cancer prevention is a realistic goal, and there are a couple of pieces of evidence that underlie that. First of all, most breast cancer is not genetic. Only about 5 or 10% is due to the high-risk BRCA1 and BRCA2 inherited genes. And the estimate is that about 27% is due to inherited genes, all told, including the ones we don't know about. We also see enormous variation worldwide, with higher risk in the industrial countries and rapidly growing risk in the newly developing countries, and increased risk among women who move from a low-risk area like Asia to a high-risk place like California. So, since that time, 3 additional fundamental pieces of science have come together to point the way to how we might address breast cancer prevention. First, basic biology. There are several types of chemicals that have biological activity in the lab that would lead us to worry about them for breast cancer. One of these groups is chemicals that cause breast cancers in animals. Another is chemicals that mimic hormones. We know that estrogen is a breast cancer risk factor, and we know that there are plastics and chemicals in detergents and cosmetics also can make breast cancer cells grow in a lab. And a third class of these chemicals are chemicals that can affect development of the breast even before birth in ways that make it more susceptible to carcinogens later in life. So first of all, we have the basic biology, many dozens or hundreds of studies demonstrating biological activity of everyday chemicals that makes us worry about their effects on breast cancer. Second, and this has been a core of Silent Spring Institute's contribution, we know we're exposed to these very commonly. I'm going to show you some of the studies that we've done. Because these are chemicals that are in consumer products, they're in our houses and they're in our bodies. We were the first to measure many of them in homes. The Centers for Disease Control began measuring them in people's blood and urine. So we know the chemicals don't stay in the products as companies originally said. They end up in us. And we know that breast cancer is affected by things that happen over the entire life course, from before birth all the way up through the 5 years before diagnosis. And that's crucial because what that means, all of these pieces together mean that human health studies, like traditional epidemiology, are not going to be a good way to learn about breast cancer prevention. Because, think about it, we have these chemicals that we've just put into use after World War II. They're invisible, they're ubiquitous, and we think that their effects begin before birth and breast cancer develops 60 years later. So it's not a great research design for an epidemiologist to follow people for 60 years. We would never do a clinical trial where we randomly assign some baby girls to be exposed and others not, and then wait those 60 years to see what happens. So when you hear, as you often do in October, there's no proof that environmental chemicals cause breast cancer, you have to say back, well, of course not, because we wouldn't do that study. So we need a strength of evidence paradigm. And this is something that's become a core to our research agenda at Silent Spring Institute, and it was thrilling to see the President's Cancer Panel in 2009 make this a headline in their executive summary and in their letter to the President. They talked about the need for a new paradigm for long latency disease and said, "Dear Mr. President, we need action based on compelling animal and in vitro evidence before cause and effect in humans has been proven." This was an articulation of the Silent Spring research paradigm, which says if you know that there's biological activity that affects, that makes you worry about breast cancer, and you know there's human exposure to that chemical, then you have a basis for action. It's time to begin to educate people about it, to regulate, to reformulate products. And this is how we decide what research to do. We were very excited again last winter, about a year ago, when the Institute of Medicine also adopted this, although it was less visible in the news media. They wrote that evidence from animal or mechanistic studies that suggests biological plausibility when human evidence is lacking for a particular factor can be the basis for reducing exposure. So again, this is a breakthrough in our conceptualization of what kind of evidence, what kind of science we need for action. So we've been trying to fill in those boxes, and I want to tell you about a few of our contributions. We created a list of those chemicals that cause breast cancers in animals. You can find it on our website. And it was the basis for a new study that was just released this fall. You might have seen news about it. A Canadian group looked at breast cancer incidence in women workers in a region of Canada where there were women working in a variety of agricultural and industrial settings, and they used this list as a way to decide who was exposed. I mentioned that we know now that chemicals can affect the breast development before birth. Silent Spring Institute convened an international workshop on this and published a consensus set of papers identifying what some of these chemicals are. And they're very common. They're in plastics and pesticides and non-stick and stain-proof surfaces. And our household exposure study, this is a piece of work that Phil has been a collaborator in for a long time. Began on Cape Cod, then moved to Richmond, California, to a community right next to an oil refinery that experienced a very bad explosion and fire this year. We tested for 89 endocrine disruptors and some other industrial chemicals from the refinery. And so this is now the most comprehensive study of pollution in homes. We found 66 of the target chemicals. We found phthalates in every home. These are a hormone disruptor that the better understood effects are on baby boys and genital development and sperm count in men. We found 27 different kinds of pesticides in homes. And we found 15 chemicals that were above a health guideline, even though most of these chemicals don't have any health guidelines. Another of our recent studies looked at, so we know these chemicals are in houses, where are they coming from, what are the important sources, and how could you get rid of them? We wanted to try to design a study where you try to reduce exposure. So we ended up testing 50 different types of cleaners and cosmetics and personal care products, and found 55 hormone disruptors and asthma-related chemicals in the products. All of the conventional product types contain target chemicals, and disturbingly, 3/4 of those that are marketed as green or alternative also did, although we did find 11 products that did not have any of our target compounds. You can find them on our website. So our newest study, which came out last week, we went back to the homes in Richmond and Bolinas, California, that we had tested before. So in our Cape Cod study, we were the first to test for brominated flame retardants in the US. These are thyroid disruptors, so they have effects on brain development, IQ, attention, motor skills. And then we found in California even higher levels because of a unique furniture flammability standard there. And those PBDEs were phased out. So we went back in 2011 to see what else is being used. And that study was released last week, and we got 123 million unique views. So in the first 2 days. So, but if you haven't been one of them, please do go view. This is very exciting. It came out on the same day as an activist-led study conducted by Heather Stapleton and Arlene Blum about flame retardants in couches. So now we know they're coming from the couches, they're in-house dust at levels above the federal EPA health guideline in a majority of homes. So this kind of research is different because we're testing people, we're testing their houses, and in our research, because of our vision of partnership with our study participants in the communities where we do research, we tell our participants and the communities that we're studying what our results are. Cheryl Patton, who's in the circle, she's one of our study participants and also a colleague. She's the director of the biomonitoring project at Commonweal. And she reminds researchers that when you begin a study, you are entering a relationship. People expect you to treat them the way you would a person that you're in a relationship with. And so that has been a really exciting and meaningful part of Silent Spring Institute's research. It's been transformative both for our study participants and for us as researchers. Phil has been deeply involved in this work. So here's an example of what a person in our study, in our Cape Cod study, would get a report like this that tells them what pesticides we found in their urine. And this particular person had DDT, for example, in their urine, even years after it's been banned. So this is a very different kind of results communication than has been happening in the past. It's transformative for our participants who suddenly are thinking about, how did these chemicals get into me and who said it was okay? So our study participants in California got their results 2 weeks ago saying that there are carcinogens in their house dust at levels above federal guideline, and they're coming from the products that they bought. And who said that was okay? And so then people begin to think about what they could do about it. It's transformative for the researchers too, because we have the experience of having to tell people this information, and an engaged sense of responsibility that we need to do something about it with them, that this is a partnership where they need a scientist advocate to help them go somewhere with this. So that kind of brings us full circle back to Rachel Carson, who said 50 years ago in her testimony before Congress, she asked Congress to consider the right of the individual to be in their own home and not intruded upon by chemicals placed there without their permission by other people. So we still have a lot of work to do. We are going to Congress now with our allies to say the Toxic Substances Control Act isn't working. The Safe Chemicals Act would be a better alternative. We need new ways to test chemicals before they go into products. We need to require information about these chemicals before it's too late. And interestingly, again, to end on a Rachel Carson note, I just went back to the book this fall in celebration of the anniversary and read the last chapter. The last chapter of Silent Spring turns out to be about what we would now call green chemistry, about designing things to be safe in the first place. So we haven't succeeded in that, but there is now an important movement to do that. Silent Spring Institute is trying to, we've been terrific at finding problems. Now we're trying to create a science agenda that will solve them. So we're beginning to develop high throughput chemical screening methods so you can test thousands of chemicals inexpensively to figure out which ones are the bad guys. But we clearly need a transformation in the public understanding of these problems, and I'm counting on the Social Science and Environmental Health Research Institute to be a part of that part of the solution. I just recently learned that no one who is under 27 years old has ever lived a month when the temperature was below normal. Analogously, for these toxic chemicals, the normal level of polybrominated diphenyl ethers in your blood would be 0. And I seriously doubt that anyone in this room has that normal level. We know that 100% of us have many of these compounds in our bodies. And that's really not okay. So I look forward to your questions and your thoughts about how to transform that. Should I take a few questions now, or should we save them?
Yeah, we have time for questions after each speaker, so please feel free.
Yeah.
A wonderful talk and tremendous work you're doing. Congratulations. I'm always intrigued by the different standards that emerge in different areas of health practice. So for example, in genetic testing, it's considered an issue of ethics to not tell people about risk factors unless there's a certain degree of certainty. So I think in that field it's a bit over the top. People want, sort of the mainstream thinking is if it's not 100% certain, it's unethical to tell people about it. I think, so then people go to great lengths to how would you explain to somebody a test that tells them they have a 10% or 20% risk. And that's a very different, almost asymmetrical standard to the notion of fully informing people about things where there's a presumption of toxicity, the standard, a really necessary standard when talking toxins. And how do you reconcile sort of a different sense of sort of the ethics of giving people information that they may or may not have the ability to process?
Well, that's a wonderful question, and that's the